Chào mừng mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình, gọi là học code cùng tôi. Thì hôm nay tiếp tục chúng mình sẽ học Oracle ABAP. Thì hôm qua là cái ngày đầu tiên mình đã học xong rồi. Cái phần đầu tiên mình đã học xong rồi. Tiếp theo đến phần sử dụng SQL Workshop ha. Rồi thì mấy phần đầu chỉ là lý thuyết thôi, nên là ok, mình sẽ quay cái lý thuyết này, mình sẽ up lên luôn đó, rồi đến lúc làm bài tập thì mình giảng như vậy thôi. Ok, rồi thì clip là ở tốc độ 1.25, có phụ đề tiếng Việt. Rồi ok, và bắt đầu ha.
Welcome to this module on using SQL Workshop. In this lesson, we see how to get started with SQL Workshop and use SQL Workshop components. In this lesson, you are introduced to SQL Workshop. You learn about SQL Workshop components. You also learn about the Object Browser component and how to create new database objects using Object Browser. What is SQL Workshop? Oracle Apex includes the SQL Workshop for application developers to maintain database objects from the browser. This feature is particularly important when developing in hosted environments or when the application developer does not have access to the underlying database and cannot use tools such as SQL Developer or SQL Plus to manage the database objects. It provides fast and easy access. All you need is a web browser. Next, let us see how to access the SQL Workshop components. You can access SQL Workshop in two ways. To access SQL Workshop from the Apex homepage, you can click on the SQL Workshop icon and select the component you wish to access. Or you can click on the down arrow on the SQL Workshop tab and then select the component you want. SQL Workshop has different components like Object Browser, SQL commands, SQL script, utilities, and RESTful services. You can also select the default database schema for your SQL Workshop session towards the right side of the page. The SQL Workshop provides various tools. Based on the task, you can use the following component of SQL Workshop. Object Browser enables developers to browse, create, and edit objects in the database. You use SQL commands to create, edit, view, run, and delete database objects. A SQL command can contain SQL statements or PL/SQL blocks. A SQL script is a set of SQL commands saved as a file in the SQL script. A SQL script can contain one or more SQL statements or PL/SQL blocks. You use SQL scripts to create, edit, view, run, and delete database objects. You use utilities to build SQL queries, load and unload data, and even generate DDL. Apart from these, you can also view object reports, manage user interface defaults, restore dropped database objects, compare schemas, monitor the database, and view database details. RESTful services enable the declarative specification of RESTful services used to access the database. These services work with Oracle REST Data Services, or ORDS, to enable the consumption of these services. This component helps you create, edit, and delete RESTful services. You will learn more about REST services in the upcoming modules. Object Browser enables developers to browse, create, and edit objects in a database. To access the Object Browser on the Workspace homepage, you can navigate to SQL Workshop and select Object Browser. It provides simple wizards for you to create and manage different database objects. You can browse and modify tables, views, packages, procedures, and more. You can even filter the data in the tables and views. The Object Browser page is divided into two panes. The Object Selection pane. This pane appears on the left side of the Object Browser page. It lists the database objects of a selected type within the current schema. You can further narrow the results by filtering on the object name. The Detail pane. This pane appears to the right of the page. It displays the detailed information about the selected object. To view object details, select an object in the Object Selection pane. Click the tabs at the top of the Detail pane to view additional details about the current object. For example, on the slide, you can see that the M table is selected in the Object Selection pane, and the detailed information of this table is displayed in the Detail pane. Let us see how we can create database objects by using the Create Database Object wizard. This slide shows how to create a table from the object browser. When you initially access Object Browser, the right pane displays a cards region with tiles for each object type. Clicking a tile displays the Create Object wizard for the selected object. You can also click the Create Database Objects menu and select Table. Let us now look at a demo. I am in my Apex Workspace homepage, and from here I can navigate to SQL Workshop by either clicking on the SQL Workshop icon here, or I can click on the SQL Workshop navigation toolbar menu. So once I click on the SQL Workshop icon, I am in the SQL Workshop homepage. From here, you can access different components of SQL Workshop. Towards the right, you can also select the schema for your SQL Workshop session. Since I have only one schema associated with this Apex Workspace, I have the default schema selected. Now, let us go into Object Browser and see how we can create new database objects. When I click on Object Browser, the first time, you are presented with the following screen. On the left is the Object Selection pane, where you can browse through different database objects in a tree structure. On the right, you are presented with different tiles of database objects. Clicking on any of the tile will open the Create Database Object wizard for that particular object. For example, if I want to create a new table, I can click on Table. You can also create new database objects by clicking on this context menu on the left and selecting a database object. Now, let us see how to create a new table from the Object Browser. I go ahead and click on Table. Let us provide details such as table name. Let's say I want to create a projects table. Now, what is semantics? Semantics is nothing but for text columns. When char is selected, then the number of characters is used to determine the storage. And when you select byte, bytes are used to determine the storage. If you are not sure what value to choose, you can choose default, which defaults to the database setting. Alright, next you can add comments if you want for the table. And then under the column section, you can start adding columns for your table. This section is an interactive grid and you can edit the values of this report by adding new columns. The first column, let's say I want to track the project ID, and I'll make this the number column, and this will be my primary key. Next, I'll add a name column which stores the project name, and this will be a varchar2 column. So when you select the data type as varchar2, you need to specify the scale or length. And I want this column to be not null. Next, I want to track the start date of the project, and this is going to be a date column. DDL statement that will be used to create the table that we just entered. As you can see, using the object browser, we are able to create the table without writing the SQL statement ourselves. Once you are happy, go ahead and click on Create Table. So a table called Projects is created in our schema, and from here you can also modify the table, such as adding a new column, modifying the column, renaming or dropping a column. You can even do modifications such as renaming the table, truncating the table, and dropping the table even. You can also create lookup tables from here. You can explore the different tabs provided in the detail pane where you can add data, insert data to the table. You can also use other components like SQL commands and SQL scripts to insert data. And you can also add new indexes, constraints, triggers, and so on. This was just a simple example of how to create a table from Object Browser. Similarly, you can create other database objects like views, indexes, sequences, packages, and so on. Now, another interesting point to note about the Object Browser is that if you have been working on a table here and you navigate back to the app builder, you go and work on your app or pages and come back to the Object Browser, you will see that the Object Browser opens the state in which you had left it previously. Since we had opened the projects table view, you can see that the projects table view is still open and you do not need to navigate again from the tree. So this is a useful feature that was recently added to the Object Browser. In this lesson, you learned about SQL Workshop and the SQL Workshop components. You also learned about Object Browser and how to create new database objects. I hope you learned something useful. Thank you for watching.
Xong cái clip phần 2.1 ha. Rồi thì clip hôm nay đến đây thôi. Rồi cảm ơn mọi người đã xem. Bye bye.